When we think about military power, we usually measure it in tonnage, right? Like if you look at the news or read any kind of defense analysis, it's always this numbers game.
Oh, absolutely. It's very quantifiable.
Yeah, exactly. How many aircraft carriers does the U.S. have? How many tanks is Russia churning out? Or how many fighter jets is China building right now? It's a very tangible, almost comfortable way to keep score.
Right, because it satisfies that basic human need for a leaderboard. I mean, if I have 10 battleships and you only have 5, well, obviously I win. It's basically the logic of the playground.
But the research we're digging into for today's deep dive argues that if you are still just counting hulls or airframes to figure out who wins a modern conflict, you are effectively doing math from 1945.
Yeah.
We're looking at a whole stack of reports and doctrine analysis today, and the overarching theme is that the physical stuff of war, the missiles, the jets, the tanks, is it's becoming secondary.
Secondary to the architecture that actually connects all that stuff. That's the real shift. So the central concept here, the mission for our deep dive today, is to unpack this idea of sensor dominance.
Right. Moving away from platform dominance.
Exactly. We're moving away from an era where the best tank automatically wins to an era where the winner is the one who can see the battlefield, process all that data, and strike before the adversary even realizes they're in a fight.
And the source material uses this really provocative phrase right at the beginning. It calls it the war above the war.
It's a great phrase.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it implies that future wars might actually begin silently, right? Long before a single missile flies, there's this unseen contest happening in the electromagnetic spectrum or in orbit. And that invisible contest completely dictates what happens on the ground.
Precisely. It's the silent struggle for awareness, a struggle to see without being seen. And this isn't some far-off sci-fi prediction. This is the current actual reality of modern military doctrine. A fighting force today operates like a distributed nervous system.
Okay, so if you blind the nervous system,
the muscles become useless, no matter how strong those muscles are.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's ground this in a bit of history before we dive too deep into the tech, because obviously this didn't just happen overnight. The materials lay out a pretty clear evolution of warfare eras. It feels like we went from mass to mobility, and now we're somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, it's really helpful to view it as a shift in what constitutes the currency of victory. So in the industrial era, think World War I and World War II, the currency was mass production. It was attrition.
Just sheer volume.
Right. Can I build artillery shells faster than you can blow up my factories? Then we moved into the mechanized era,
which was all about maneuver.
Yeah.
The blitzkrieg model, getting your firepower to the enemy's weak point faster than they could react.
Correct. And then parallel to that, we entered the nuclear era, where the focus entirely shifted to deterrence. It wasn't about fighting the war. It was about ensuring the war was too costly to even start.
Mutually assured destruction.
Exactly. But then we arrived at the current era, what the research calls the informationized era. Militaries no longer fight as these isolated standalone platforms. They fight as interconnected systems.
And looking at the analysis, there's a very specific turning point where this shift became just undeniably obvious to the whole world. 1991, the Gulf War.
Oh, without a doubt. The 1991 Gulf War is arguably the most critical pivot point in modern military history. It's where this informationized era really announces itself on the global stage.
Because I think most people, they remember Desert Storm for the live CNN coverage and the footage of those smart bombs going right down the ventilation shafts. But the sources argue the real revolution wasn't the bomb itself.
No, not at all. The bomb was just the punctuation mark at the end of the sentence. The revolution was how the sentence was written. The coalition forces possessed a level of situational awareness that was basically godlike compared to the Iraqi military.
They had everything networked.
Right. They had satellite reconnaissance. They had AWACS coordinating the air traffic. They were using digital networks to share data.
So while the Iraqi commanders are sitting there using radios and paper maps, probably waiting hours just to get a report from the front line,
the U.S. commanders are watching the Iraqi troop movements in near real time. The analysis specifically points to the left hook maneuver.
That's where the coalition forces drove deep into the open desert to flank the Iraqi army.
Exactly. And they could only execute that maneuver because they knew with absolute certainty that the desert was empty of enemy forces. They could literally see through the fog of war. It wasn't just about having better tanks. It was about the commanders seeing the whole board while the adversary was playing blindfolded.
Which leads right into the core mechanics of how this all-seeing eye actually works today. Because it's not just sticking a really good high high-def camera on a drone, is it? The term that keeps coming up in the research is data fusion.
Data fusion, yes. And it's critical to understand this. You're not just looking at one camera. You are fusing the entire electromagnetic spectrum.
Okay, so what does that actually look like in practice? What are we fusing?
Well, think about a modern battle space. You've got radar sweeping the sky. You have infrared sensors looking for heat signatures. You have sonar in the water. You have satellites in orbit and cyber teams monitoring network traffic.
But individually, those are all just fragments of information, right? Like a radar blip just tells me something is there, but not what it is. An intercepted radio signal tells me someone is talking, but maybe not exactly where they are.
Exactly. On their own, they are incomplete. Data fusion is the incredibly complex algorithmic process of layering all those individual fragments on top of each other to create a single comprehensive picture.
So the system connects the dots automatically.
Right. It says, okay, the satellite sees a geometric shape, the radio intercept matches a known enemy frequency, the infrared picks up a specific engine heat signature, and the radar confirms the speed and heading.
And suddenly you don't just have a blip. Exactly. Boom. You have a highly confident ID. You know it's a hostile Su-35 fighter jet, you know its altitude, and you know its exact trajectory. And whoever puts that puzzle together first has a massive advantage. The sources talk about the initiative loop, the logic of detect, decide, deliver.
Or the OD loop: observe, orient, decide, act. It's the foundational theory of combat speed. The idea is simple. Whoever can detect the enemy first, process that information, and deliver a weapon first controls the entire engagement.
And because of this sensor dominance, we get into things like beyond visual range air combat, which is wild to think about. The pilot might launch a missile at a target they have never physically seen with their own eyes.
They almost certainly won't see it. The days of the World War II-style dogfight are largely over. A fighter pilot today might get targeting data beamed to their jet from a radar plane hundreds of miles away. They verify the target on a screen, press the button, and the network guides the missile in.
It's the same in the maritime domain too, right? Over-the-horizon targeting.
Exactly the same principle. A ship can launch a cruise missile at an enemy fleet that is way over the horizon, completely out of range of its own onboard radar, because a drone or a satellite is up there painting the target for them.
Okay, so that brings us to the brains of the operation. Because all this data has to be managed somewhere. Let's talk about the AWACS, the Airborne Warning and Control Systems. These are those big commercial-looking planes with the giant rotating radar domes on top.
Right. And they are not just looking for enemy planes. That's a common misconception. They are essentially airborne command centers.
They're the quarterback of the sky.
That's a perfect analogy. They are the brain of air operations. They assign targets to friendly fighters. They manage the airspace traffic. They route data. But, as the research highlights, they represent a massive vulnerability.
Because if they're pumping out all that radar energy, they must be glowing like the sun on the electromagnetic spectrum.
They are screaming, "Here I am," to anyone listening. And without them, situational awareness degrades instantly. Reaction times slow to a crawl. If you shoot down the AWACS, you basically lobotomize the enemy's Air Force.
But there's an even higher layer, right? The expert analysis spends a lot of time on the space layer. Satellites.
Space is the ultimate high ground now. Everything depends on it. Satellites provide the early warning systems that detect missile launches. They provide the high-resolution imaging. And crucially, they provide the navigation and timing signals, GPS, that keep the whole data network synchronized.
And the scary part is, space is now a strategic vulnerability. It's not a safe haven anymore.
Not at all. If you blind the satellites, you blind the military, period. Which is why we're seeing so much investment globally in anti-satellite weapons, dazzlers, and jamming tech.
Okay, so we have all these sensors from the bottom of the ocean to outer space pulling in data. That leads to a very modern problem the sources brought up. The problem of simply having too much information.
Cognitive overload.
Right. If you have 1,000 drone feeds coming into a command center, no human can watch all that. We need artificial intelligence just to filter the noise.
AI is absolutely essential here. Yeah. Human capacity maxes out very quickly. The AI's job is to sit there, monitor those thousands of feeds, identify the patterns, and say, hey, human commander, look at camera 42. That shadow just moved, and it matches the profile of a mobile missile launcher.
But the research is very quick to point out the risks here, too. It's not a magic bullet.
No, it introduces entirely new risks. Algorithmic bias is a huge one. Over-reliance, where a commander just trusts the machine without verifying. And the most interesting one is electronic deception.
Tricking the AI.
Yes. adversarial machine learning. If the enemy knows how your AI visual recognition works, they can paint a specific, weird geometric pattern on the side of a tank. To a human eye, it just looks like modern art, but to the AI, it exploits a flaw in the algorithm, and the AI classifies the tank as a school bus.
That is terrifying.
It is. It's a constant game of cat and mouse.
So dealing with all these vulnerabilities requires a structural shift in how militaries organize themselves. The materials describe this transition from relying on a kill chain to building a kill web. Can you break that down?
Sure. A kill chain is a linear process. Sensor A spots a target. It sends that data to Command Center B, which then orders Shooter C to fire.
It sounds efficient.
It is efficient, but it's incredibly brittle. It's a single point of failure. If the adversary jams Sensor A or bombs Command Center B, the chain is broken. Shooter C is useless.
So the kill web is the solution to that fragility.
Exactly. A kill web is distributed and resilient. Instead of a straight line, it's a mesh. Multiple sensors feed into a shared network which connects to multiple shooters. So if your primary radar gets destroyed, the system just instantly reroutes targeting data from a nearby drone or a satellite or even a soldier on the ground with a laser designator.
So you can't just cut the head off the snake anymore.
Because the entire web acts as the brain. But, as you pointed out, relying heavily on technology creates new weaknesses. The primary goal of modern warfare is no longer just destroying the platform, blowing up the tank or the ship.
It's about breaking the web itself.
Yes, blinding the enemy or denying them awareness. And that is done through electronic warfare, literally jamming the radio signals so the nodes can't talk to each other. It's done through cyber attacks, hacking in and corrupting the data, and deception generating false targets on the enemy screens.
And we see this completely reflected in global doctrine. The sources we're reviewing spend a lot of time analyzing China's military modernization through this specific lens.
Yes, and it's important to look at this impartially just as a matter of strategic doctrine. The People's Liberation Army operates heavily on this concept of informationized warfare.
They seem to have internalized this lesson completely.
They have. Their strategy heavily emphasizes disrupting the adversary's sensors while fiercely protecting their own. They recognize that trying to match a rival platform for platform might be a losing game. But if you can win the information contest, if you can blind their satellites and jam their kill web, you can paralyze them before the kinetic combat even starts.
It's a very systemic way of looking at warfare. Now, I want to pivot to the specific case study the research highlighted, which is India, because this really crystallizes what this means for a major power trying to modernize today.
It's a fascinating example because it highlights the tension between buying platforms and building architecture.
Right, because the public debate, as the sources point out, is almost always focused on the platform. You turn on the news and it's always, we need 42 fighter squadrons, we only have 30. It's always about the raw number of jets.
But the actual strategic power, the research argues, lies in the architecture. It doesn't matter if you have 100 state-of-the-art fighter jets if they don't have the sensor architecture to tell them where the enemy is.
And geography plays a massive role here for India, doesn't it?
A huge role. Look at the northern borders.
Yeah.
You are dealing with the Himalayas, the most mountainous terrain on Earth. Ground-based radar is severely limited there. It can't see through solid rock. You have these deep valleys where an adversary can move entire formations completely undetected by ground stations.
You absolutely have to have airborne sensing.
You need AWACS, you need high-altitude drones, you need persistent satellite coverage. And then look at the other side of the country, the vast maritime zones in the Indian Ocean. A ship's radar only goes to the horizon. To monitor that much water, you need a networked fusion of space and airborne sensors.
So the big lesson here, and I think this applies to anyone, not just India, is that investing heavily in sensors, in data fusion, in network resilience, might actually yield a much greater strategic advantage than just buying more hardware.
Absolutely. A slightly smaller force that is perfectly networked and has total situational awareness will consistently outmaneuver a much larger force that is struggling to see the whole picture.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together. The main idea we've been unpacking today is that modern conflict is no longer about who has the biggest stick. It's about who has the sharpest eyes.
Yes. My main takeaway from all this source material, my signature take, if you will, is that future wars are going to be won by the side that can successfully deny the enemy the ability to understand what is happening. If you control the flow of information, you control the speed of decision-making.
And if you control the speed of decision-making, you own the battle.
You dictate the terms. You are acting while they are still trying to figure out what just happened.
So the ultimate question for the future is not who has the most powerful weapons. The question is who understands the battlefield first. Awareness really is power.
It's the only power that matters when the shooting starts.
It's a completely different paradigm. And it leaves me with this one final thought for you to mull over. We've talked about what happens when one side is blind. But what happens when both sides have perfected this? What happens when two adversaries completely and perfectly jam, spoof, and blind each other's kill webs at the exact same time? Does warfare just freeze? Or do we instantly revert back to World War II tactics, relying on binoculars and compasses? It's something to think about the next time you see a headline about a new satellite launch. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.